All right, going live, I think. Let's see if this pops up. And there's the preview, and there's me. Hey, we got audio. I hear live audio. Do we got voice? Yes. Okay, so I got my monitor screen up, and I got my comments window up. So when you get here, pop into the chat and say hello. This is Steve. How you doing? Welcome to the new community section. Welcome to the live streaming. Welcome to where'd my Ableton go? Did I just lose audio? And let's close that. Want to keep that on a loop. Cool. So I got a little background music happening, and I want to hear from you. I want to see who's here. Oh, Daniel says, hey, Steve and everyone. Check it out. I saw that comment pop up on my new streaming software. So I got this program called Ecamm that's a lot easier to use than OBS. And I got the camera right here. What's happening? And my monitor screen over here. Hey, Daniel, thanks for testing that thing with Lori with the Facebook group. So I wanted to have another question that specifically says, are you an Ableton user? Because some people are signing up and, you know, I look at their Facebook group, their Facebook profile, and they don't have a lot of Ableton stuff on there. And maybe they make tracks with something else, but really I want to keep the group focused on Ableton users because those are the people who are going to come into our crew and share tracks and talk about plugins and Ableton stuff and just kind of add the best quality material to everybody else. So that was the idea behind that. And the rule number 3 about asking about negativity, there haven't been that many problems. I had to ban somebody last week who put up his profile picture had him with a gun in a woman's mouth and she was naked and he was like smiling. I was like, dude, I don't want you in the group. I'm sure y'all understand that. Laurie, greetings. I have to go to YouTube to get comments working. Okay, so me too. So when I'm on the member site, I can see the video playing, but I don't see the comments. I think I can embed a chat window underneath that video player in the member site, but for now what we got to do is click to the YouTube video and then we get the comments. Ooh, Daniel says video, audio, stereo, perfect. Yeah, boy. I'm still going a little bit crazy with this camera. I got this nice long USB cable and it doesn't work. The only thing that works with this new camera is a super short USB cable. I mean like this short, so that's why it's right next to my camera, but who cares? That's all working. You can hear me, I can see you, and we're gonna be doing a little more of an open format, which means I have a lesson planned, but that's not the only thing I wanna do. I wanna keep this community section open to questions from anybody who wants to ask about Ableton projects, and I can even go into the program and possibly build something to show you the answer. Or, it's wide open. I want to hear what you're struggling with or what's going on. So let me go to full screen. That's going to look like this. And then in my world, that look like that. So now on my computer, I'm in full screen Ableton. I want to just wait till this shows up on your side. Does anybody hear double voice? When I turned on my laptop, my monitor audio, I heard double voice. Does anybody hear double voice? I hope not. So, okay, so right now I can see on my computer monitor, looking at full screen and live, there's a little window of Steve underneath it. We're going to want to get that little Steve window out of there. So I got to do that. I think if I close that little box, that should be gone. And now, still working out the Ecamm, a couple little details. And what I want to show you is the new Izotope Elements plugin. Whoa, my bandwidth got all fuzzy. Oh shit, now the whole screen's gone. Okay, so you said, no, I do not hear such a thing. All right, so now tell me yes for the full screen. If you can see the full screen Ableton and it looks okay and you can still hear my voice, then we keep going because that's where I want to be. And I'm back at the beginning of the audio loop. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. So now I have good audio levels and just waiting to see. Make sure we have good audio and video on full screen. What the hell is that? My playback window looks like a crazy zoomed in window. Do not zoom to app windows. Yeah, no, just a part of the screen. I saw that for a second too, and I think I fixed it. There's me on camera. And there's me in, yeah, I want entire screen. Oh, it's such a joy to be doing tech. Okay, yeah, Daniel says yes, it's zooming in and out. 12:06, we only spent 5 minutes so far on this. I'm not gonna freak out. I just wanted to work smooth. And now I'm looking at my Ableton screen. Okay, that's when I went to camera view. That's a cool baseline. Window pops in and out. Okay, Ableton screen's back in. So what are we looking at? Well, here's a track I made, and I'm not really talking about the making of the track. I wanted to talk about this plugin today. It is Ozone Elements, and it's a bit of a mastering plugin. Lori says, now I can see the whole thing and hear something, but my speakers aren't as good. Okay. I'm going to keep going. I think I can see the screen on my monitor window right now, and it looks like it's not taking up the total full screen, but that's okay. You can see it. So what are we looking at here? The purpose of this lesson is to look at a new VST plugin and talk about it using audio engineering terms that we know from somewhere else. So the idea is anytime I get a new plugin from anywhere, I want to be able to open it up and use it and kind of decipher what is it all about, what's it doing, what's happening, what are the devices inside it. And worst case scenario, if I see a plugin that I like but I don't want to buy it or license it, maybe I want to just rebuild those same things in Ableton. So maybe you see a mastering plugin like Elements and you're like, oh, that sounds great, that's cool, it does what I want, it's really simple, it's cool. How do I make that with Ableton? So the idea of this is I want to show you kind of like from an audio engineer's point of view, what is this plugin doing and what's it all about? Now, if you have any questions or anything else, let me know. Pop it into the chat, and I'll be happy to answer you. So what do we have first? Well, we got some music playing. There are these 3 sections up here that give you an overview of like a signal chain. And I spent only about an hour or 2 with this plugin so far. I used it once, and then I opened it up a few minutes ago just to get it kind of coming in. So these have on-off buttons, just like any other plugin. So right now in the chain, it's not doing anything with these devices. I can turn them on one by one. That is just like in the Ableton window. If I have a mastering chain, I can have, have the chain on, turn on a compressor, turn on something else. In fact, let's I'm gonna delete the other plugins and only use Ableton stuff. Maybe we can actually rebuild a chain right now using Ableton stuff. So this audio effect rack is going to be, I'll call it rebuild. So whatever we drop in here is going to be a copy of the Ozone stuff. You can see I have a master spectrum on there. Something else that we'll talk about later. What is Ozone Elements all about? So first there's an EQ. Let me turn off these other 2 devices. Basically, EQing is something you always want to do. Let's hear how this thing sounds. Okay, I can see when I boost it up a bunch, I can roll the frequency around. And what I'm doing now is, I just said the EQing is something you always want to do. That might not be literally true. You always want to be ready to EQ, and it's a tool you need a lot. That doesn't mean every single track always needs EQ. What is surgical mode? I don't know. So in this situation, on a master channel, I might be looking for something that sounds kind of off that I want to pull down a little bit, maybe around 900. And then you can change the Q. Now, are we seeing anything familiar? Are we seeing anything that I've seen before in live? Well, I think the answer is yes. So let's move Ozone a little bit. Open the Ableton browser, Audio Effects, EQ8, and I want to drop that right in here. Not there exactly. I wanted to drop that right there. So in the Ozone EQ, we had a little spectrum analyzer that was showing the waveform. We could pick a band. We could change the frequency back and forth. And we could change the bandwidth, or the Q setting. Q setting is how wide of a band of frequencies are being affected by your EQ curve. So right now, I'm not sold on the Ozone EQ. I think EQ8 is just fine for what I want to do. I'm comfortable with it. It's inside live. I know it's not going to crash from being some other VST or whatever. I can grab it around. And if you're using a push, you can even grab your push knobs and get comfortable with tweaking a couple things at once to find a crappy area. Right now, what's this? Ooh. Right around 225. There's kind of a hollow place. So maybe I'll dip that out. So, all right, so up until now we have Ozone doing some EQing for us. What else is in that EQ that we could check out? Well, band 3 we activated. I'll minimize that. There's wave shapes. What are these all about? Well, high pass filter. That means we can cut off the low end. Do we have that in Ableton? Yes, we do. Right down there, we can choose high pass filter, 2 different slopes. What's this one? Low shelf EQ. All right, that's like the EQ on your car stereo or home stereo. You pick the frequency where it's going to work, and then below that frequency, it cuts everything at the same amount. I haven't seen any comments come in for a minute. If I missed something, let me refresh my page and check. I want to make sure, for double, triple sure that I see everything. And if you have any questions, let me know. I'm always peeping over here to make sure I'm checking them. I hate it when I miss comments. I always want to see things right when they happen. So we can be connected, man. It's all about being connected. So this Ozone EQ is giving us some cool stuff. We've got a low shelf option, bell curve. That's like the parametric EQ where you can choose the frequency and the amount to cut and boost and the bandwidth with that little control on the side, which is commonly called Q. For reference, in general, if you don't know where to put it, start around 1.5. Q of 1.5 will give you a natural sound. That means a lot of analog EQs are built to be around a 1.5. This has to do with how many octaves of frequency are being affected. And that's a connection between, analog electronics and frequency and stuff. A little deeper than I want to go right now, but it's around 1.5 is a good starting place for a Q setting. And of course, we can do that down here in our EQ8 too. What else over here? High shelf. All right, same as low shelf, but on the other end. So that gives you a high-end boost, or the air on the sound, the high end on the cymbals, or you could take it down if you have some tape hiss or something like that. You can pull that down a little bit. And then finally, a low-pass filter. And these, I like how you can just drag this number and move it. And then the slope goes, this is like how many dB per octave. So a slope of 6 is, if the frequency is at, 1.3 kilohertz, when you go an octave away, the sound should be 6 dB louder. How do you find an octave away? You double the frequency. Frequency doubles to make an octave. So an octave above 1.3 would be 2.6 kilohertz. And it goes like that. So if you want a really steep cutoff, you tighten this up. 48 decibels per octave. That means if you go an octave away, it's going to be minus 48 dB, like almost totally silent. That's really steep. You can have some phase shifting problems sometimes from really steep EQ slopes or filter slopes, but that's the basic idea. So we can accomplish all these things with EQ8. There's our 4-pole filter, and there's our not as steep slope. Play around with these to hear how they sound. They're kind of fun. Let me get to a part where there's something happening in this track. So now I'm going to roll down the low-pass filter with band 3. I know you know what a low-pass filter sounds like. I'm going to turn off band 5. Can we just change the filter slope? So right here, it's like a hard cutoff at 1.8 kilohertz. A more gentle slope gives you, you still hear some of the highs even though the cutoff filter frequency is lower. And this is kind of cool. You can turn your EQs on and off to AB the filter or the EQ. Just like in EQ8, turn the device on, we can test them. So that's all cool. So if you have any other questions about Ableton, anything else at all in the world of live, let me know and I'll bring it up. I'm looking at the Ozone Elements plugin to see what is this thing doing and what can I get out of it if I wanted to use it, if I wanted to create something in Ableton to get this done. So let's turn off the EQ now and go to the imager. This is kind of a problem because in Ableton, we only have half of this device. Here on the imager on top, we've got a waveform, spectrum analyzer, call it what you want, correlation trace, that's kind of interesting. Now, this is really cool for reading your sound or seeing your sound or seeing what your sound is doing. Let me get a loop of a good section. Keep it right in here. Make sure our sound doesn't run out. So this spectrum analyzer in Ozone is not doing a whole lot for me. I mean, okay, we're at a quiet part of the track. I can see things pulsing and it's moving. This horizontal line is not really doing it for me. I much prefer the Ableton spectrum analyzer, which I have set up with a special preset that you can have, the Mix a Texture Master Spectrum preset. And this one gives me much more accurate info. And I want to point out how I set this up. I maximized everything. There's no preset for this spectrum setup. When you go to the spectrum options, like, I don't know why they didn't build it the way I always wanted it to look like the fastest, most responsive thing. So I maximized the blocks up to 16:384, channel stereo, refresh rate as fast as possible. The average is low. I like to look at the bins, not the line. And I like to keep the maximum line. So when you stop, that blue line on top stays there. That's a good way to, if you're at a point in the song and you want to hear a sound, if you want to find the frequency of a sound at a specific point, you can turn on that max line, start your sound, and find it. Like there's a little chirp in there. It's going da 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 da. And what if I want to EQ that down? I got to find that da 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 da. Well, I got the mouse at a point where that sound comes in. I start the track. Da 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 da. It looks like it's right there. I can see a bump sticking up. Well, what frequency is that? How do I know? Ableton Spectrum is amazing. This little box down here in the corner will show you the frequency where your mouse is, okay? You put the mouse on the line and you get the frequency in the box. So the mouse is on the line. It looks like 805, 815, somewhere around 800 hertz. So let's see if we can go to EQ8 and find that sound at 800 hertz. I think that's it. And EQ8 even has a spectrum inside it, just like on Buxengo. Steve Farrar, hey, what's happening? Daniel says much better. Cool. Yeah, give me some feedback if you need me to change something or whatever. Let me know what's going on. We're just looking at the Steve, if you came in late, we're looking at this Ozone Elements plugin. This went around like last week or 2 weeks ago. Everybody was passing it around, downloading it for free. I wanted to. Somebody asked me a question about what does it do, and they're like asking me, what do I use this for? Or in other words, when I get a new VST plugin, how do I know what it does, what to do with it, and what is it similar to in Ableton? So I'm running through it right now. At the beginning, we looked at the EQ setting and found out that this is basically doing the same stuff as EQ8. So I don't really need the Ozone EQ. I mean, it's kind of cool that they put it in the same package. And you can see the Ozone EQ has a spectrum line, but can I clearly find that one sound at 900 hertz or 800 hertz? I sort of see it right there, but what if I move the mouse around? Do I get a reading? I don't. For me, the spectrum analyzer in Ozone is not that cool. I like the one in Ableton. Didn't want to do that. I wanted to do that. And like I was saying, keep the maximum line on. Down at the bottom, keep the range not on automatic. Keep the top at 0 and the bottom at -180. That means the full dynamic range is going to stay put in the window, and the line is not going to bounce up and down. In other words, the numbers on the left side of the scale are going to stay put, and you'll be able to compare things and measure equally without these numbers changing all over the place. I like to have fixed reference points. Boom, boom, boom. I can see my baseline notes. Right now I'm looking at those 3 mountain peaks in the low end. And that note is like bow, 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 bow. If I want to hear that first note, bow, it's right there. The spectrum says 97, and below the 97 in the little window it says G1. So I think that baseline starts on the note G. Now I can actually trace the bass notes. That peak says the note is G. Below it, it says the note is C. Then we've got an E flat or D sharp and an F. So that pretty much gives me like the pentatonic scale that I'm using for that bass line. Right here in Spectrum Analyzer. How did I get it? By setting up fast response time and the maximum line and the scale measured like that. So I can actually see those bass notes. Now, as a mixing person, I might be like, hey man, that first note is quieter than all these other ones. See that peak is at -18? These other 2 peaks are up at -12. I'm probably going to go in with some EQ, boost up the frequency right there to get that opening note a little bit louder, and then maybe get those other ones down a little bit lower to level out the volume of that bass line so that every time I hear a bass note, it comes through the system at the same pressure level so I can hear them so they're not getting lost in the mix. That's pretty important. I love Spectrum so much. It's kind of nerdy, but it's a really cool, useful thing. So that's what we're looking at here. What else is in the Ozone Imager? So I got my music on. Oh, a vector scope. What's going on over here? This is kind of fun. This is a left-right stereo image. And honestly, Ableton does not have one of these that's usable at all. To show you what this is doing, let me make a really obvious example. I'm going to drop a utility plugin before it. Okay, so there's utility coming in. Hello, utility. Maybe I don't have utility in my user library. I want to drop the mono plugin. There we go. And just to make it a little bit more exciting, I'm going to map the on-off switch to the X key. So our track is now in mono. And what do we see in Ozone? That stereo scope went straight up and down, full mono. Okay. Now I'm going to turn off the mono plugin, and it shows the stereo spread, stereo width. Let me know if you ever use stereo imagers. Type in stereo if you use any kind of stereo imaging tool. I'm curious. I want to know if you do that. I don't really until the very end of a mix, like a pre-master or something. Sometimes when I bring in a new synth, if it's like a synth pad with a lot of phase going on and it's a real shifting stereo left-right kind of sound, then yeah, I'll put on a phase scope and I want to see what's going to happen when this track collapses to mono. Because if you collapse your track to mono and sounds start to drop in volume, that means you have a phase problem. Or if you put your track into mono and like the kick drum disappears, then you have a bad phase problem in the bass, which you don't want to have. You want to have it be like, in stereo it sounds full and wide and interesting and spacious, but in mono, it's still usable. And check this out. This is just, that part right back there was mostly bass line and kick drum and stuff, right around here. And look how our scope is pretty well centered. Now some other sounds come in, it gets a little wider with that reverb. And when the synths come in, it should get even wider than that. Let me just check my broadcast level if I can. And now with those high frequency synths coming in, there's stuff moving around right and left, and the stereo image is getting a bunch wider. There are other display modes you can use. The polar level, which is all right. It's more time-based. And then Lisa Zhu, kind of grid-based thing. Oh, Steve says, I haven't used the stereo. Yeah, you know, you don't really need to. The biggest thing you have to do is make your kick drum, your bass line, and your snare drum in mono and get them sounding good straight up the center. Here we are back in a bass line and beat section. You can see the stereo image is pretty thin. It's like everything's coming at you right up the center. Wonder what it would be like if I take one of my sounds that's real synthy. Okay, this sound has a lot of stereo. Let's check it out at Ozone. Oh, Daniel says very interesting. Cool. Look at that. If you can hear this in stereo, that left-right pulse is showing up visually almost like the letter V. Now I'm going to hit the mono switch. And we can still hear it. I can hear there's a mid-range synth. It's not as interesting, but if I'm listening to this on one speaker, I know I'm still going to hear it. Or if I'm at a club and I'm only near one speaker and the left-right speaker, the other one's on the other side of the room, you know, I want to be able to hear this sound even if the club is not evenly stereo spread. I'm going to turn off mono right now, and we get all that width happening. And while we're here, I see a lot of low kind of frequencies, like under 200 hertz in this synth part. I do like a warm synth pad, but that's a little ridiculous. I want to look at this in my trusty spectrum analyzer. That's what I would call a warm pad. The main peak is bouncing up here, up at 1,000. Down below 200, I don't know if I really need that much of that sound. What do we got on there? Ooh, a couple of EQs I'm not using. So I think I'm going to take this EQ, put it on my pan group. There's a mid-side thing going on there. That's cool. Now I can cut this up to like 700 or 800. I still hear the main body of that sound without that super low thing. So I think to be generous, I'm gonna put it up around 300 or 400. I don't want that low muddiness happening in that sound. I just want it to be kind of warm and filling up the middle space. Like so. So, Ozone helped me figure out a problem. Let's take off the mono. Nice and wide. And finally, I'm going to unsolo this and bring it back into the mix. Now the stereo image is all over the place. Let's hear what happens when the beat drops back in. Hopefully there's going to be a center anchor that shows up that gives us a fixed point in the middle. And there it is. Look how that diagram changed. When that beat dropped back in, let me turn this down. When the beat dropped back in, the image focused much more up and down in the center, and that wide stereo stuff came back into a centerline image. So stereo imagers, honestly, the number one place I use it is with a pad sound like that, where I want to make sure a really, really wide, freaked out stereo pad is going to be okay in mono. I would do the same thing if I had a vocal with like a chorus effect or a flanger or something, or like if I triple tracked a vocal and had a left one, a right one, and a center one, I would use a stereoscope to see how wide are they and then make sure I know what happens when I collapse it back into mono. When you're doing your mixes, it's a really good idea to keep a mono plugin right here on your master channel after everything, okay? Is that right, after everything? Probably, I guess I'd put it before the spectrum. But I mean after your EQ, after your compressors, after all your stuff, before the final output. And where I found that, in case you're not sure, go to the audio effects section in the utility, and there's a cool little preset for for mono. And then in Ableton 10, you can play around with like only having the bass in mono. But for now, let's just say the whole thing is in mono. And I like to put a key command on there so I can easily turn it on and off and check my mix all the time. Lori Johnson, I like that vector graphic. I know, it's like plotting points at the speed of sound. What else is Ozone doing for us? What can you do for my mix? Well, we have some ways to modify the stereo mix. What's this width function? Widens or narrows the character of the stereo effect. I'm not sure if you can see that little pop-up window, but that's what I see on mine. So Ozone has given me my own mono plugin to check my mix. If I boost it up to 100, it's going to hollow out the center and make it much wider than before. Back at 0, I get more of a centerline focus. And down at width minus 100, we're in mono. So that's cool. I don't have to use a utility mono plugin if I'm using Ozone. I can just play around with this width thing. What is the stereoizer? I don't know. It says it enables a stereoize control. Well, I just started using this Ozone plugin, so I don't know everything there is to know about it. I'm going to play with that stereoizer and see what we get on this bass section. I love this bass line. I'm excited to make this into a cool little track. All right, so I jacked up the width to 100%. It looks like the bass is all over the place. Oh, it's a delay. So it's putting a really short delay on between the left and right channels. How interesting. And the stereo field is going to get scattered all over the place. Where is our mono centerline image? I don't have any idea. I bet if you took this mix right now like this and played it in a club, it would probably sound kind of crappy because the left and right low end are all over the place and unfocused. If you play that with a straight up and down mono image anywhere in any system, you're going to hear exactly what's in the mix without being affected by the speaker placement or the room that much. So let's get this back to neutral. 0. Turn off the stereoizer. Am I still on mono in my Ableton plugin? Oh yeah. Oh, Steve says, what's the master assistant? Did you check that yet? Top a plugin in the middle. Is that the AI? Dude, I don't know. What are you going for? Target, CD. Intensity, low, medium, high. I'll say medium. Next. Oh, it says for best results, play the loudest part of your track. Let's say we're doing that right now. Oh my gosh, the assistant is analyzing my audio. It totally is AI. Dude, this is like Lander. This is like, oh shit. It just kicked in the EQ. Kicked in the maximizer. Shall I accept? I guess so. Wow. Oh my god, look at that EQ curve. It cut the bass down, boosted up the mid-range at 480, and took down the high end a little bit? What the hell? Does that sound better? Maybe it does. I don't know. That's pretty damn handy, and honestly, Ableton has nothing like this. Notice that the automatic deal didn't do anything with the imager because that's basically, it has some stereo controls, but it's mainly visual. And that brings us to the maximizer, to maximize the crap out of your audio. To understand maximizers, oh, Daniel says, I played with the assistant, it's great. Yeah, I think it's actually, I'm kind of into it for now. It's sort of interesting. The way a limiter works is it's like a compressor, but it only has a few controls, usually threshold and makeup gain output. So this one has a ceiling that's going to give you the absolute limit of how loud it is on the way out of your track. So minus 0.3 of a dB. You can't even hear that, but that's important for not having digital clipping or intersample clipping on the way out of your track. And then the threshold means as you lower the threshold, more of the peaks are going to get compressed downwards and the volume is going to get raised upwards at the same time. It's like a compressor with automatic makeup gain and a fixed ratio and fixed attack and release time. So now it's useful to see this little visual display. I'm going to start taking my threshold down. And as I start hitting those peaks, the overall level gets louder. But the price is when you get down too low, you can get some distortion. It can be crappy. It can kill your track to death. And a flat line of loudness is not always what you want. So character fast or slow. Slow is going to be a gummier, longer release time where it stays when it hits the gain reduction stays down longer. short release time is going to give you a little more distortion because it's getting off the gain reduction and boosting up the makeup really quickly. So the more you lower the threshold, in general, I'd say the longer release time you need to have so that your levels kind of stay balanced. What's Daniel saying? Actually, the riser I made in the training program is with the Master Assistant. Oh my gosh, you're giving away your dirty little secrets. That's cool. I might try to use this some more as a, this is what I would use to like check my homework. In Ozone right now, I would make a track, make a pre-master, export that as a stereo mix, and then when I go to do my own mastering, I would probably turn on this mastering assistant after I did my own master and check it and see what kind of results I got and see what does Ozone think about my mix. And honestly, Ozone makes some great quality stuff. I do like what they're doing a lot, and I probably would use this. Let's see if do anybody remember what the threshold was in the Master Assistant? I think it was like minus 10.3. So it's hitting a bit of gain reduction, and it had a pretty fast release time. Stereo independence, I don't know. Link, transient, and sustain controls. Okay, this is about joining the left and right stereo control. Transient emphasis. This might be related to kind of like the attack time to allow more of the transients to poke through or have a really short attack that smacks them down so they don't poke through. That can affect the feel of your music a lot. Let's see if we can catch that. So at zero transients, it's like that. Transient maximum. It looks like a little more of the track is coming through. Let's squash the hell out of it. Now we got transient emphasis down at 0. I'm expecting to see it a little more flat. Transient emphasis up at 200. And the line does look a bit bumpier. Huh. So how do I compare this to something that I've seen in live? Let me bypass all these, close this down. Well, let's get a limiter on here. So we go to our plugins. I just hit full screen in Ableton again. So if the screen woggles out on the playback, let me know. I want to put it right there. Oh, come on. So the Ableton limiter, one downfall is it's really small. You don't get that big, pretty image. So tough luck for us. What do we got? Ceiling. Oh, automatic preset to minus 0.3 dB. That means no matter what we do, the top level coming out of the master channel is going to be minus 3 is going to be our peak. What else is in here? The gain. Did we have a gain in the Ozone? I'm not sure, but we had the ceiling. Does Ozone give us an output gain? Yeah, we do. We have in this input output section in Ozone, we do have a whole master level situation going on. So that's always there. I guess that can down here we can control exactly how much. And then if you have a problem in your track where, like, let's say somebody gives you something where they had a cable halfway unplugged and their whole entire master is off, you might have to decouple your stereo and fix it with like a, you know, minus 3.1 or something. That's like hardcore mastering surgery that I hope you don't have to do. Should be balanced, should be coming out so your master channel can stay linked. So let's link that back on. And I'm not totally sure what these two controls are. Might be before and after. Input gain left, input gain right, output gain, output gain. So yeah, so this is kind of like the left side is like setting the gain going in before any of your devices, and then the output gain is coming in afterwards. So if you have a really low level track that was recorded super quietly, you might have to jack up the input level before you even get to the EQ so that these plugins are operating within their optimal level for the best signal to noise ratio. So let's zero out the input, zero the output. And that's cool. Ozone is giving you some good tools here. What do we do in the compressor if I want to get nearby some of those functions? Well, we've got our limiter. Here's our gain, which is going to affect the level of the signal. See, when I turn up the gain, it starts hitting more gain reduction. That's how you know this gain is operating on the signal before the limiter function. The limiter ceiling is like, literally like a ceiling. If I take this down, you know, whatever, minus 12, it's going to be doing a bunch of gain reduction. Now, the more I turn up the input gain, the harder the track is going to hit this limiter, the more it's going to get squashed. And we start getting that kind of crappy distortion sound just like we got in Ozone. Short release time. And there you go. That's that overcompressed, squashed down, kind of messy sound. Does not sound good on very many masters, but if you're working with drum loops and you have, like, let's say you have an acoustic recording of a drum set, like you take your phone, you record somebody playing drums, only drums, nothing else, and then you have a stereo audio file of only drums. Try this trick. Put a limiter on it and squash the crap out of it. I mean, plow it into that limiter as hard as you can with a short release time, and you'll get some crunchy, fuzzy distortion that'll level out the whole room. It'll level out the drum kit, raise the volume of the reverb, right? Because there's like, if you record a natural drum kit, there's going to be reverb in the room. And you can get some super interesting drum textures that way that you can blend back with the original signal and get like this super crunchy, fuzzed out, full feeling drum kit that still has the punchy attacks from the original. So that's one good time to do a short release and smash your limiter to death. But for any kind of master channel, I don't even want to really see my limiter hitting. So let's put it up on a longer release. You might think that the ceiling could be 0, and it could. That's the top of the digital scale. That's full scale. That means your samples are completely saturated with sound. But there's a little chance that it could make a lower quality sound when you convert it out to MP3 or something else. So people found out in the Napster years that a little bit lower ceiling can make a dramatically improved audio file on the output end when you export it. If you have any more questions, let me know. We're chilling out at 12:45. I've been looking at the Ozone Elements plugin and talking about how to recreate that in Ableton. So far what we did was we used EQ8 for our EQ. We copied the limiter and learned a little bit about the settings to get a nice limiter sound with maybe maximizing the sound a bit. Another thing we're missing in live, let's see, I want to bypass. I'm going to put the C letter on there so I can bypass my own effects unit, turn on the Ozone unit. Watch this. Oh, not that. If I map the Ozone control also to the letter C, I can turn them both on. I can just change them quickly. Put you in there. And I'll put my mono controller in there. And that's a fun trick I like to do. Did you catch what I did? Here's my whole rebuild rack. That's off. So by putting the same controller on both of the power switches with just one key, I can A/B them. I do hear a tiny little bit of latency when I change that. Do you hear that? So this Ozone plugin might be doing a little tiny bit of latency. That could be meaningful if you're using it on a single channel within your whole mix. Be aware of that. I just found out myself right now. The measurement system. I wanted to talk about that. The Ableton limiter doesn't show you very much about what scale we're using. This was giving us, LUFS, the loudness units compared to the full scale measurement. This is a more complicated way of gauging loudness, where it kind of like averages the whole entire track and takes into account where our ears are most sensitive, so that the overall feeling of loudness is being measured rather than the technical level of voltage pressure or electronic pressure. This is a weird story too. There's one of the problems that was happening was when the world converted to digital TV, they were like, how the heck are we going to make everything the same level? Because it's not on an analog station anymore. People are not broadcasting with an actual human sitting there with a VU meter. And they would have TV shows that some of them were not loud, and then sometimes the commercials were crazy loud. And then there would be shows where there's like a huge bass drop in surround sound effects audio, like you're watching a movie on your digital TV. And the volumes were crazy all over the place. So the LUFS system was developed to give digital signals, digital processing, a way to measure average loudness without using an analog VU meter like in the old hardware world, because we're not using those anymore. And there's a bunch more to it, that there's different ways to weight the scale and how to calibrate it for what you're doing. But basically, LUFS is an average of the loudness of the whole track. It's not like an instantaneous loudness. We looked at the character, transient sustain, transient emphasis. Guess I'll turn that off. Stereo independence. All right, bypass basically on. Gain match. I think you can set an external audio. It says it enables Ozone to automatically match effective gain when bypassed. Oh. This allows you to get a realistic test. Now, there is this old joke that if you want to make people like music, just turn it up louder. Everybody knows that. So like in the studios, if you had two versions of a track and you wanted them to like the other version, you would play the other one a little bit louder and be like, well, I made some edits on the track. What do you think? And they'd hear it. And they're like, oh, that one's louder, dude. That's so much better. That's actually what turned into the loudness wars, is people wanted their music to come out loud, and they didn't think about the dynamics or the, what was going to happen when people played it on different sound systems. They just thought in a A/B comparison of two tracks, they liked the louder one. So gain matching is going to let you hear the before and after version of these EQs or maximizers or whatever without jumping levels louder and softer. That's a pretty cool feature because you can get a more accurate idea of the tone and not be confused by just which one is louder. So drop it into mono. Swap left and right. That's an easy way to tell if things are off balance. You might get used to your mix and hear everything like, oh, it sounds good. And then you switch it left and right. And you're like, oh my God, my vocalist is in the other room. What happened? So that's kind of fun. Steve, thank you for pointing out that master assistant. I had not gotten up to that part. I was sort of ignoring the presets because I wanted to go through these and just examine them as individual options. Warm definition, genre-specific mastering. Oh my gosh. Metal mid-range, techno tight dance. Let's see the techno plugin. Reduce sibilance and add impact for club systems. Well, that's cool. So we got some presets. Ooh, we can load through the presets. A little bit of latency. Tight dance. Undo history, ozone settings, help. I think we might have looked at pretty much what there is to do in this plugin. Reset to active. Let me know if you have any questions. It's getting around 12:48. I want to keep these under an hour each time. So, who set the left-right differently? Did that automatically happen? What if I select the tight dance preset and then do the master assistant? Target CD, intensity, high intensity. I want to make this intensity very high right now. Adjusting spectral balance. Ooh. Now here comes the maximizer threshold. What's going to happen? Ladies and gentlemen, get ready. Accept. That looks like it's getting squashed to death, and I feel like I hear a little distortion on the bottom. But who am I to say against the brain of Ozone? Now I just went to my own Ableton rebuild rack to bypass. So you know what I'm going to do for like the next 2 hours after this? I'm going to play around with my Ableton rack and try to match the exact same sound that we're getting from Ozone. So right away when I go into the Ozone mix, I hear it louder and I hear it scratchier and fuzzier on the bass. And I don't like distortion on the bass. I don't like that saturated over squashed thing because that takes away the clean power. Question from Steve. Would we only add this plugin to the master after our track is finished? Yes. I think the best thing you should do is take everything off your master. If you really want to get tracks ready for final export and, for final mastering and like publishing, honestly, I would produce like this. I would have my master channel with everything bypassed, no limiter, no EQ, no mono. I keep a master spectrum and use this because it doesn't change the sound. It shows me visually where I need to EQ, and I get an idea of the track that I'm looking at. I would export this with my master peak level. Like here, check this out. I'm turning this up on the mixing board right now. This is the loud part of the track where everything's happening, the bass and drums, but the master is peaking at like -5. That's a usable level. I could export that and master it and have good 5 or 6 dB of space to bring it up louder. And then when I have a simple single stereo audio file, then I would grab Ozone, strap it on there, and start dropping plugins in Ableton and doing my own mastering to, you know, change my EQ curve, change the tone, do some compression, and finally hit it with a limiter at the end, and maybe adjust some stereo width. But again, the stereoizer, the stereo width, is something that you should be doing on a channel level in the mix first. So when you get to the final master and you're seeing your stereo imager, this is kind of like surgical repair. I think about it like the average track that gets professionally mixed should not need stereo adjustment. It really shouldn't. Like if you get somebody that was making some crazy stuff with like stereo dubstep bass back and forth wubs, like bop, 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 totally back on either side, then you might be like, dude, we got to chill that out for the final version so we don't literally bounce the record needle out of the groove, which can happen. That's a good tangent. I don't know if you know this. If you make, one of the reasons you do not make a stereo bass is bass waves are big enough and powerful enough that when you put your track on vinyl, the left-right difference of a stereo bass line could literally jump the needle out of the groove and make your record skip. They found that out the hard way, so when people say put your bass in mono, one of the reasons is to keep the damn record needle in the groove. So anyway, stereo, you know, mid-side adjustment or stereo width adjustment or anything, that's a mastering operation that I would put in the surgery department. Really, the best mastering is like, you get a stereo mix, it's just not quite loud enough because they did that on purpose. So you raise it up a little bit louder, maybe do a touch of EQ that's almost invisible, and just prepare it to sound the same volume as all the other tracks on your album, and then you have a finished product. So a big part of mastering is, you know, a group of tracks and getting them to sound similar, like they came from the same universe or from the same studio. So when people play the album, they don't have to touch the volume, they don't have to touch the EQ, they can just listen to the whole album all the way through. They're going to hear the vocals, they're going to hear the bass, they're going to hear the instruments, and they're just listening to a record. Like when you go to a concert, you hear the band. Maybe you move closer or farther away, but that's what I have to say about that. What about automating plugins on the master? Yeah, sure, man. If you want to automate, yeah, definitely. Actually, one of the rules of pre-masters is don't fade in your beginnings or endings because that's traditionally a mastering job. So in the mastering plugin, yeah, absolutely. When I got to the end of the track, I would take this guy, fade that on down. Or if there's, you know, if there's a lot of different stuff happening in the song, maybe there's a solo section where the frequencies go crazy in the mid-range. So maybe like if there was a, you know, a synth freakout, I might be like, doop, I'm going to add, you know, take that down. Or I probably would do something like this and have, okay, I would get this one ready. A narrow band right here. Most of the track is going to be like this. When that synth freakout happens and the synth gets real loud up here, I would just pull this down a little bit, automate that, wait for the synth to be finished, and put it back in. Or even better example, what if you're listening to a band and there's a drum solo, and during the song, the drummer's all cool, everything's fine, but during the drum solo, he starts killing it on this crash cymbal, like every beat. Then I'd be like, dude, we're going right here to 6,000 and taking that down until you chill out on your drum solo. So yeah, automating stuff and mastering. Again, that's something that ideally it should happen in the mix session, but sometimes you get a mix where they kind of didn't do all that stuff, and this is like another round of detail editing that you could work with to get your track sounding perfect. And yeah, there's a lot of automation that goes into the master channel, or I mean the master mix. What am I trying to say? The final mix for riding the vocal. I mean, if you're listening to like a Kenny G album or smooth jazz or even pop vocals, I mean, pop records have tons of automation to get every word exactly right. Even though it's compressed and EQ'd and they got limiters on there and all this high quality stuff, there are still lots of situations where they literally go in Pro Tools on every word and maybe automate it up a little bit or down a little bit to make sure the vocalist is 100% right in your face for the whole song, no matter what else is happening. Good question. I like that question. So yeah, this is about the end of what I wanted to do today. We looked at the Ozone Elements plugin with an equalizer, stereo spectrum analyzer, and the vector scope, and then maximizer, which is a limiter. That crackle was my analog channel. I'm going to exercise my fader. That means I mute the channel, run the fader up and down a bunch of times, and unmute it. It's a old analog trick. I need a new mixing board. This one's been through a lot of love and a lot of shows. So we're looking at the Ozone Elements plugin. There's EQ, stereo imager with a spectrum analyzer, kind of, that I didn't love. And then the maximizer, we talked about the LUFS volume level, our input-output. We discovered this amazing mastering assistant. I'm going to cancel the mastering assistant. Thank you. I think there's even a way to analyze a track coming in and then match it by copying EQ settings. Daniel says, great tips as always. Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for watching and thanks for hanging out. Oh, and while we're here, let me get back into camera view. How do I do that? Up here? Hey, Steve on camera. My camera's still connected. What's happening? I want some feedback from you guys. Lori said at the beginning, Lori said she cannot see the chat window in the members site, which is a very good point. I think we should have that in there. So I'm going to work on how to embed that. Personally, I want the full screen display to be full screen without that black box around there. And so if we could have like a really honest full screen and have the chat working right here in the members site, that would be a really good live streaming experience. So you don't have to click out to YouTube. And the other thing that's going on, I guess, is the community section. Do I have this up? I'm logged in. Yeah, I am logged into my user account, so I'm going to go back to screen share, and I think you should be seeing my member vault window with the new tracks thing on there. So I want to make sure that our track sharing is really going to work smoothly and be fun and easy. So here I am looking at the live streams, October week 1. I'll make sure the live stream always stays on the top so you can go to the most recent one right away. Community ask me questions. There we are. There we are. So when we go to track sharing, what I want you to do is tell me, are you able to easily drop your links, share your tracks, and see comments? I found out that when you log into the Discus platform, like right now I'm logged in as Steve Knotts, it will email me and tell me, hey, you got a comment. There's something else going on. And then when I come back to the site, I can see the comment. So I find that kind of useful, and I really want to make sure that I want to make sure that you get comments and that you know you got a comment and you see the comment, you get feedback, and you can work that back into your mix lesson or your mixing process as soon as possible. So give me some feedback on how this track sharing thing is working. If it turns out that it's not working, we may have to go to a private Facebook group for members, but I really want to keep it on the members site so it's all encased in there. Oh, another comment. Steve said, I scored Neutron a while back, which is similar but for mixing. Yeah, Neutron is like a multi-track analyzer and everything. Daniel said yes. Shoot, I forget. I'm not sure what question you said yes to. I think you said yes. Is it easy to use? So this is going to take it's just going to take a little while to build it up with the new tracks here inside the community section. We're going to have to get some people posting tracks, posting comments, and getting into it. And I would like to spend most of my time every day doing this one. I know the last month I kind of slacked off on leaving comments in the Facebook group because I was moving and setting up studio and doing these crazy 20-hour gigs. But my dream would be to spend like every morning, have morning coffee, listen to tracks, give people some nice timestamp comments, and be really up on it. So like you make a mix, you get comments, you make another mix, even once a week make a new mix and get comments from a couple people. Because that's what I want. I want to put up a mix and hear back from people. Daniel said yes for track sharing. It works the same way for me. All right, cool. Thanks you for that. I would love it if we can have a fast rotation of getting our edits done, getting new tracks up, and making it really easy to get good feedback. So here I am back in the window. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. I want to make this loop a little bit longer as we're on the way out. And then we'll have some cool music to listen to. This is actually a remake of a song I started, a bass line I had in my head from like 2001. I had it recorded on tape, and I found the tape, and I was listening to it, and I was like, man, that bass line is so cool. I want to recreate that. So I've been rebuilding the bass line, putting in some beats and everything, and turning that into a track. I'm not sure when it's going to come out, but that would probably be a good one for the new tracks post, Steve, right? Oh, Steve Farrar, I hope to try it this weekend, track sharing. Yeah, cool. You know, when you get a second. And remember always, it does not have to be a full mix or a full track or anything. If you're working on one of the sound design lessons, literally take 45 seconds of one channel, export it to an audio file, and share that, and just tell us, hey, I was working on sound design, I made this cool synth, let's hear it. You know, I would like to be getting really into the, whatever you're working on today. Like I like to export a test mix every single day. So every time I work on an Ableton project, I get to the end, I select a section and export it so I have an audio file that's a record of what I did that day or that night, and then I can hear it again later and compare it to my other versions and hear if it's getting better. So that's a really good way to make progress. It takes a little more work, I guess, to upload it to your SoundCloud account. But whatever, we're all online. Steve said thanks, and yeah, we're gonna hang out next week. Oh, Lori, that was interesting. Learned a thing or three. Too bad I missed the giveaway. Oh, the Ozone Elements giveaway. I bet you could probably get it somewhere if you were looking. And I think that was their Black Friday prep. I think what they did was they took a cheap product, and their strategy was to get a whole bunch of people to sign up on their mailing list. So they put out Elements in October, and everybody's like, yay, Elements, share it, and they all signed up. And now Ozone is stacked up with a couple thousand more people. So for their Black Friday sale, they're going to be like, hey, remember that Elements thing that you like so much? Here's how you can upgrade and get the better thing. It's even more like that. That's what I'm guessing is their strategy, and good for them. They put out good product. I enjoy it. I know you dig it. And hey, I think we're done. It's about an hour. We're in here. Thanks, Lori, Steve, and Daniel for hanging out with me. If you have any more questions, you can email me or post them in the forum, and I'll get to them later. For now, I'm going to get myself some lunch and get ready. You know what I've been doing? I joined this gym where they teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Oh, my God. I'm not in the martial arts part of it yet. I'm still in the conditioning and fitness because I got to get my core muscles strong. Remember in February when I hurt my back and I was like couldn't walk? I decided to get all this muscle strengthened up. So I went on Wednesday, and I think I did 100 sit-ups. And I was like, oh, today I got up. Even still, laughing hurts. I'm feeling like, ah. So I'm excited to do that. Oh, Steve says, yeah, Izotope, do it again. Check Plugin Boutique. Yeah, cool. Daniel, thanks. Hey, thanks a lot for watching. Let me find the finish button. I'm going to take it out for now. See you again soon, and I'll be on next week with another live stream where we look at some Ableton instruments and effects. All right, love you guys. Bye-bye. End broadcast.